Hello, everyone. About 30-ish years ago, I decided that I wanted to delve into the scriptures seriously. I wanted to know the scriptures well. And so I started to study the scriptures more and more seriously. And I've basically been doing that ever since. Somewhere along the line, within the first few years, I started this little side hobby. That's the way I looked at it in the beginning, anyway. It was a little side hobby as part of this study of the scriptures. And that little side hobby was false prophets. And that study basically started with the question of, who are these guys and what do they do? And one of the first questions I asked myself about false prophets is, how do they operate? Do they wake up in the morning and think to themselves, I think I'll go out and deceive some people today? Is that how their mind works? And I realized pretty much right away that no, that's not how false prophets think. They don't wake up in the morning with insidious schemes to deceive people. They're self-deceived. They've already deceived themselves, and that's how they justify deceiving others. That little side hobby of mine turned out over the years to be very useful to me. Understanding who false prophets are, their motivations, what they do, and everything that's associated with that turned out to be very, very useful to me. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, beware of false prophets. One thing I've learned by observing people over the years is that people don't take Jesus seriously here. They don't beware. False prophets are just whoever most people want them to be. People who don't agree with me are false prophets. That's about the end of their thinking process on the matter. If they don't agree with me, they're a false prophet, period. That's how they do it. In that same context, Jesus said, you will know them by their fruits. Another thing I've learned about this is that pretender Christians, fake Christians, can't do this. They don't get it. They can't tell them by their fruits. They just can't do it. Throughout the years, I've been kind of trying to find a sort of baseline. What's the foundation of all of this? And Paul does explain it, actually. That's what he's doing in Romans 7. He's explaining the problem. It's the problem with human beings. There's an underlying problem in every human being. And so there needs to be a solution to the problem. One of the ways to describe this problem is also described in the secular world. And they call this problem confirmation bias. And I would highly recommend that you understand this. I would highly recommend that you do the same thing I did, actually, concerning false prophets. Learn about that. Don't make it a big deal, but learn who false prophets are. And I would also highly recommend you don't do that with Google. Who is a false prophet? And then you'll go and find some page and it'll have a little list of what a false prophet is. Most of those are wrong. Most of those amount to a false prophet is those who don't agree with us. That's what every false prophet says, right? Confirmation bias. Understand what that is. Understand why you do not want to do that. If you want to be a true follower and believer in Christ, this is a really bad thing to do. Confirmation bias is a really, really bad thing to do. And so if you don't understand what it is, go to Wikipedia and start there and start learning. The secular world will describe this in what I personally consider to be a really benign sort of way. And the reason I say that is because the Bible talks about it. This is where my study in false prophets, my side hobby, has led. Well, the Bible actually talks about this. Confirmation bias really is the practice of self-deception. When you work it all out, that's what it is. You keep spinning and weaving your arguments to get the result you want. And that'll be despite the facts. Despite the facts, you'll keep spinning and weaving and spinning and weaving. When you watch Christian apologists, for example, debating skeptics, what the skeptics are really saying is that confirmation bias is a really bad thing, and I'm not going to go there. So give me your proof, give me your facts, give me your evidence. And the Christian apologists keep coming up short. And the reason for that is because they keep resorting to confirmation bias. So their standards for evidence, the bar is set really low for themselves and set really high for everybody else. These Christian apologists have a double standard, basically, when it comes to that sort of thing. And that's because in churchianity, confirmation bias is more or less what they actually teach you. They teach you to engage in this. And when you sort this out for yourself, what confirmation bias is, you'll realize it's just a method of self-deception. Now think about that. This is what the church teaches people to do. And the way that you can see that is when you introduce the word faith. Faith for most of the people out there is a confirmation bias routine. You just keep reaffirming things to yourself. You keep reaffirming your beliefs to yourself. And as a result, and people have recognized this before, it becomes faith in your own faith. This is where 90-some% of the people end up in churchianity. They have faith in their own faith, and they're really just practicing a big confirmation bias routine. In other words, they're practicing self-deception. And that's why when you watch these videos between Christian apologists and skeptics, you see this situation where the skeptics are basically saying, no, I'm not engaging in your confirmation bias routines. And on the other hand, the Christian apologists are whining and all indignant that the skeptics refuse to participate in their confirmation bias games. And this is a very, very important thing to see. If you're a rational person and an honest person, you'll want to understand this. If you're a person that is heavily engaged in confirmation bias, just turn off this video and go watch a kiddie video or something, because there's nothing I can say to you. There's nothing that's going to get through to you. Nothing. I might as well be singing to a fence post. That's the kind of thing confirmation bias does to your brain. So I would highly recommend that if you do not understand this, or you're not aware of confirmation bias, you'll probably want to learn about that. There are so many people heavily engaged in this, and all it is, I'm telling you, it's a self-deception exercise. That's all it is. Is that something you want to do as a believer? Engage in self-deception? Of course not. You never, ever want to do that. You want to be led by the Spirit of God, the Spirit of truth. But out there in churchianity, your faith is this confirmation bias routine, and the result of that is anything goes. It's just like when you see Republicans arguing against Democrats in politics, or vice versa. Watch the news. Go watch Fox. There's the Republican agenda. There's their spin. Now flip the channel and go to CNN. Well, there's the Democrat spin, and they're both doing it. They're both spinning lies to get you over to their side. And for the Republican side, it's all good, because all we want to do is win. And for the Democrat side, it's all good because we want to win. If that's your Christianity, you've already lost. If you're doing this, you've already lost. You're done. You're finished. Believers don't do this at all. Believers are about the truth. It isn't about persuading people and getting more people on your side. On Judgment Day, how much is it going to matter how many people you got on your side? It's not going to matter at all. How much is it going to matter how many people were against you? That isn't going to matter either. It's going to be you and you alone standing before your judge. Period. You want to be truthful, always, in every respect. But in churchianity, they take you down this confirmation bias path. That's where it leads. And you start to open your eyes, you'll see this very, very clearly. This is what they do. Concerning our doctrine of the Trinity, anything goes. Just confirm this doctrine. Dream up any argument you can dream up. It's all good for the sake of our doctrine. That's how it works, isn't it? And it's true for a whole bunch of other doctrines as well. It's not just a Trinity thing. They do this with everything out there. It's spin and weave, spin and weave, spin and weave to try to get people to agree with you as if that somehow justifies you, or to try to get you, just yourself, to try to convince yourself. That's self-deception. That's how self-deception works. You don't need to do any of that if you're a true follower of Jesus. You're led by the Spirit of the living God. You have the best proof of everything that you could ever want abiding in you, the Spirit of God. It doesn't get any better than that. And you don't need to pretend either. A lot of people do that too. That's part of the self-deception program. You just pretend you're being led by the Spirit and you have a personal relationship with Jesus, even though you don't. And there's a reason that happens too. And it's all because everybody went down false prophet road with this confirmation bias routine thing that just about everybody is doing out there in the church system. You don't need to go there, man. You can be totally rational, honest, and truthful about everything, and it's all good. This anything goes thing to apologetically argue for your doctrine is a bad thing. That's not a good thing. That's not a true, honest heart. That's the kind of thing liars do out there in the world. And that's why the church system is so corrupt. It's adopted these worldly ways of doing things. You don't want to do that. Did Jesus do that? No. Jesus never did anything like a confirmation bias routine. He said, I seek not my own will. I just do the will of my God and Father. That's what I do. That's it. I'm led by the Spirit of my God. That's all I do. Pretty simple, isn't it? Lies are a tangled web. And that's why there's systematic theologies out there in the church system are such a tangled web, such a mess, such a complicated thing that people think they have to spend 40, 50 years studying the Bible to get it right. So they make sure they have their faith right, etc., etc., etc. And you don't need any of that. None of it. But people love to hold on to their lies because a lot of times their lies are familiar to them. And people like to hang on to things that are familiar to them. There's always going to be a group of people out there. I don't know how big or how small. There's always going to be a group of people out there who just insist on doing this, confirmation bias type thing. They can't help it. They just can't seem to help themselves. And they'll actually insist on doing this no matter what you tell them. You know, those are the people I'm saying to you. You might as well go watch a kiddie video or something rather than listen to what I'm saying, because I'm not going to ever get through to you. As long as you're insisting on deceiving yourself like this, have at her, man, if that's what you want to do. But if you want to be an honest and rational person, you do not want to take that fork in the road. That confirmation bias fork in the road, you don't even want to take the first step. It's a bad, bad way to go. This is what false prophet world is built on. It's built on confirmation bias routines. So I would really strongly encourage you to understand this. And you want to understand this at least so that you can make sure that you never engage in this type of behavior yourself, because it's self-defeating. All you are doing if you engage in this behavior is hanging yourself. And you don't want to do that, do you? There is only one God, the God of Jesus. And there is no God but his God.